Hello and welcome to this episode of Courageous Leaders Connected Teams. I'm Stephanie Freeth, I'm your host, and I'm so excited that you're with us today. I have my good friend Jeremy Lopatin here, and we're going to talk all things entrepreneurial operating system. And we'll get in a little bit of Enneagram 3 content as well as we go along, I imagine. So, Jeremy, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I am really happy to be here.
Awesome. And so glad that you could spend your time and have this conversation. Jeremy and I met in the Ann Arbor entrepreneurial community through a mutual friend and connection and
Mhm.
client. And I've just been so really just it's been amazing to get to know Jeremy on so many different levels. We have a lot of interests in common. We see the way teams operate very similarly, and so the reason I wanted to invite Jeremy on the podcast is Jeremy, he's an EOS implementer. So I'll let him describe what that is. But I've been really impressed as I've learned more about entrepreneurial operating system. This is a whole way of really taking a vision, but also going into strategy and execution and operationalizing that, and also working with people to work through different issues. And so as a former and still sometimes strategic planner, I really value the way that entrepreneurial operating system captures the whole range of what it's like to be in business. So I wanted to invite Jeremy on today to talk about the types of companies he works with, what he sees in teams, because we're both really interested in team health and team performance. So, Jeremy, welcome, and would love for you to describe your role and also your own entrepreneurial path so people understand
Mm,
what got you to this point as well.
right. Yeah, thank you. The Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS, we can just call it EOS, is my absolute passion. It is something that I encountered in the course of my entrepreneurial journey and watched it have just transformational impact on businesses that I was involved in. And now, as a implementer of this system for my clients, I get to watch that transformation take place firsthand over and over again with lots of different companies simultaneously. So, simply put, right, the entrepreneurial operating system is a system of sort of a holistic approach of simple tools, disciplines, practices that interlace to help orchestrate all the moving parts in a business, right? And to help channel and harmonize the way human energy is applied to a vision.
I love that description.
Yeah, because the messy part of businesses are humans, right? And so the system just helps us make sure that we are focusing well, first of all, that we're clear on our vision, right? And that the vision is shared by all in the organization. But once that's accomplished, that we are day by day, week by week, quarter by quarter, and year after year, making sure that we are always focused on sort of the most important next thing, right? And each person is clear on what contributions they're to be making in the business as we all as a group are applying ourselves towards that vision. Right. And so everything that I am going to be talking about today was created by a lifelong entrepreneur named Gino Wickman. Right. Gino wrote the book Traction. So if anybody out there is just curious to, take a deeper look at it on their own, you can go out and get a copy of Traction or listen to the audiobook. That lays the foundation of this system that we call EOS. But what we seek to do in EOS is help entrepreneurs, business owners, and their leaders initially get better at three things: vision, traction, healthy, right? So get everybody on the same page with where the company's going and how it's going to get there, right? And then just help from in terms of traction, just help instill discipline and accountability, right? So no matter where you look in the business, you see people applying themselves towards that vision. And then healthy, just meaning, helping, first starting with a leadership team, just helping this group of leaders function in a cohesive and healthy way, because it's not always the case, right? Leaders don't actually always work well as part of a team, and sometimes as an individual contributor, they do, but
Well, as you're pausing there, I'm going to pick up on that healthy word because that's something that I've been focused on as well. And seeing, we can have team performance, and that could be high, but when team health isn't there, we get into what I call the strain and burnout zone. And I think that so many companies and organizations and leaders and team members are living in this strain and burnout zone. And there's just so many ripple effects of that in terms of not only lost productivity, but lost well-being, the
Oh, yeah.
impact that people take home with them. And we're aligned in like wanting that possibility of health. And I think a lot of people don't even know that it's possible because the water they swim in right now is anything but that.
Right. Yeah, 100%. One of the it's been my experience, and I can back up and kinda tell the story of, like, my entrepreneurial journey and how I came to encounter EOS, but I'll just say on that note that one of the things that we crystallize or clarify in clarifying the vision for an organization is its 10-year target, right? Like, what's that big overarching long-term goal for the organization, kind of that energizing North Star, right? And for me, like I'm a business, right? Um, my 10-year target is to positively impact the lives of 10,000 employees
Mm.
through the implementation of EOS, right? Because I have just seen over and over how much of a difference it has made for not just the owner and the founders of a business and the leaders, but like all the way across the organization. Like just having clarity is one of the most precious things that an employee can have in a business. And EOS, in my experience, is the best way that we can deliver that. But backing up, my entrepreneurial journey started, gosh, it's like pushing 23 years ago at this point when my wife and I started an online retail company. And we had no prior entrepreneurial experience. We didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into, but we were young and had a lot of, enthusiasm and a mortgage to pay. And so off we went. And that business, we learned so much. We encountered difficulties, obstacles, challenges, and did a pretty good job navigating it for the experience that we had. But you don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
That business led me into the field of digital marketing. And I found myself on the leadership team of a marketing agency that was struggling with lots of issues, but principally people issues.
Mhm.
And in our distress, we invited a EOS implementer in to help us adopt that system, and I got to watch this transformation take place and
Mm.
what difference it made to have these tools and processes and practices that kept everybody focused and on the same page and rowing as one, really. And so then a couple years later, when I broke off and I started my own agency, I ran it on EOS from day one, and it was a little bit of a fairy tale story, right? We grew steadily and profitably every year. And as we added new employees to the business who were sort of refugees from other agencies, um, they marveled at how calm things were and how clear things were and how they understood where the company was going, and they appreciated how consistent that was. And they also understood like their role in it and like what their role was in that bigger picture. And they always had a sense of like what was supposed to come next. And that was not something that they had the benefit of in their past agency lives. And yeah, and so I just knew at that moment, like I said, it is the kind of thing a leader can do for an employee. And I just appreciated deeply how much of that was attributable to EOS. And so
Wow.
sold the agency in 2022 and just knew that the next piece of my career was going to be spent helping other entrepreneurs and business owners, experience that same improvement in the quality of life and quality of their execution in their business and all that.
I love hearing how that builds because you got the experience of getting to put that into your business, seeing how that worked, and now to get to scale it and have that long-term 10-year vision of, I want to impact 10,000 employees and think about the ripple effects on the lives of those employees, their
Oh,
families. That's a big vision, and I imagine it keeps you going.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it also like the work I do, I teacher facilitator and coach for these leadership teams that I work with. But the goal isn't for me to be there forever, right? I am trying to, empower them to use these tools in this system on their own so they can at some point, usually takes about 2 years working together, but they can graduate and they can go off into the world and just keep perpetuating it without me present so that I can then move on to the next team and the next team and keep, spreading that impact. So,
And the great thing about that is you're teaching the tools in a way that they become embodied. They become part of
mm,
the organization, that it's really driving towards self-sufficiency. So it's like, let's help you for a while, but you can do this. You're guiding people back to to like carrying that with them, which I think is a pretty cool way to be set up.
yeah, I agree. I agree. And it really does become part of your sort of, I don't know, DNA or makeup. When you're in a meeting in a context that's not running on EOS, it's like nails on a chalkboard. It just feels it. So, yeah.
Well, I'd love to have people understand a little bit more of the details. So, as a backstory, I've done strategic planning for many years. I've helped organizations set visions and come up with mission statements and come up with their values. And a lot of times, what happens is, you can get something on paper, but then the gap between vision, strategy, and operationalizing things can be really difficult to traverse, so much so that, there's a quote of culture eats strategy for breakfast that I think was attributed to Peter Drucker. And it's so true because strategy is an intention, which is important. But as you were walking me through the EOS system, and maybe we can even touch on the right behind you, you've got that lovely circle with the 6 pieces. Maybe we can go through those because as I saw those, I'm like, wow, this is a complete system.
Yeah.
It's got
No, I'd be
everything.
happy to. I think that's a great diving in point. So EOS is this system that's founded on a model of how a business, is made up and how it can be successful. And, that model is kind of founded on this discovery that every entrepreneur, every business owner, every entrepreneurial leader wrestles with like 136 different issues and fires and problems at any given time. But further, really like to the extent that we can just strengthen 6 key areas of a business, those 136 different things just kind of settle into place, right? Because they're just symptoms of a weakness in one or more of those 6 areas. And so those 6 areas, or we call them components of our model of your business, right, are vision, right? So that's the where are we going and how are we going to get there and making sure we're getting everybody on the same page with that. People, right? Having great people by our definition, making sure that we have all the right people in all the right seats, right? It's a famous, Jim Collins concept from good to great, but we kind of build on that. Data is the third key component, and that's just all about running the organization on good, solid, objective information instead of the subjective thoughts and feelings and egos and opinions and things like that. Just running the organization on data. And what we find is that when the vision, people, and data components of business are strong, it sort of becomes crystal clear, like transparent, like all the impurities and issues and, jump right out at you, which brings us to the fourth component of the model, which are issues. A business individual is not going to be able to achieve sustained success until they get really good at identifying their issues as they arise and prioritizing them wisely and solving them for the long-term greater good of the organization, not kicking the can down the curb and all that stuff, right? The fifth key component is the process component, right? So that's just about getting all of the most important, kind of this limited set of the most important stuff in the organization done, the core processes, right? We call them, but the right and best way every single time. That's how businesses can achieve consistency, which supports scalability and profitability, peace of mind, and everything else. And then lastly, the sixth component of our model is the traction component, and that's just how we bring that vision down to the ground and execute on it day in and day out, right? And that truthfully is where a lot of entrepreneurial visions kind of fall apart, is just a failure to execute, to operationalize, to bring that vision into the day in and day out of the business. and the tools and practices of EOS really help make sure that that doesn't happen.
It's so complete. So in terms of overlap with what I'm doing too, it's like, right person, right seat, really important. But also this idea of handling issues in real time, not just kicking it to the curb, not because as you said, like those things become how you handle an issue. So if something is not working, can you describe how that actually works with a team?
So the first thing that we do to strengthen a team's ability to like solve their most important issues is encourage them to create an issues list. And every team in the organization winds up that runs on EOS ends up with their own issues list, for things that are related to their area of accountability. But more than that, we're trying to encourage the leadership to create a culture where everybody feels comfortable surfacing issues and writing them down on the issues list, right? And teaching their teams that issues are okay. Like it's safe to bring up issues. They're just issues. We just have to solve them, right? So that's step one. But we've learned over time that like even the best, smartest leadership teams out there are often really, really bad at actually solving things in a definitive way, right? They get themselves in their boardroom, they put their issues up on the board, and they just jump in and attack the first one, and they just discuss and discuss and discuss without ever backing up to understand what might be the underlying root cause of an issue. And also like not ever stepping forward with a specific proposed plan of action that's going to make that specific root cause of the issue go away forever, right? And so we created this discipline that we call IDS, which stands for identify, discuss, and solve, that helps teams just do a better job solving issues. And the first step is identify that root cause. Whoever brought up the issue or anybody else is going to try to take a stab at labeling what is the root, because the thing that's on the issues list is often a symptom. And then discuss briefly, right? Once we've got alignment, agreement on what the root cause is that we're solving, everybody getting their thoughts on the table without repeating themselves. And then the brave ones got to step forward after everybody's been heard with a particular plan of action, like this bundle of next steps or action items or whatever that they believe is going to make the issue go away forever. Right. And, there's going to be some debate and discussion, but ultimately, like they come up with that plan, capture those action items, and then consider that issue solved and they move on to the next one. And as they get better and better and more disciplined in doing that, in a hour long session of issue processing in a what we call the level 10 meeting in EOS, they might crunch through 5, 10, 12 issues per meeting times 52 weeks a year. That's a lot of traction. That's a lot of issues. Those issues are anchors slowing the business down. So if you can pull 500 anchors out of is that right? Yeah, 500 anchors out of the water in the span of a year, think of how much faster you're going by.
Okay, that's fantastic. And do you see this system work for all types of organizations? Are there certain sizes? Is it nonprofit, for profit? Who tends to do really well on EOS?
Yeah, well, so the system was created initially for privately held entrepreneurial organizations. But I think the key word is entrepreneurial. And because we found that it's actually quite successful in helping nonprofits. There are many, many nonprofits that successfully use EOS to help their organizations move towards their vision. And so entrepreneurial, just in that sense of kind of that growth oriented, industrious, sort of mindset of the entrepreneur, like that's found in nonprofits. Maybe not every nonprofit, it just depends. But I think that's the common thread. But definitely privately held, publicly traded for-profit companies are tough because they have different priorities that are steering the decisions of the leadership team on a quarterly basis, right? Those quarterly earning predictions and what's gonna drive to, delivery on those quarterly promises to shareholders. Sometimes that's not what's best for the health of the organization, you know? And so it really works best, for privately held for-profit companies. I've heard of churches running on it. I've heard of fire departments running on it. I've heard of it's kind of all over the place, right? Yeah. And then in terms of size, you asked, What the marketing agency that I ran on, I was employee number one. I was the only employee, and I was using all of the tools on my own, and then it grew as I added new people. There's value to be had at the smallest sizes down there, because I mean, think about it. If one of the things we're trying to do is help overcome organizational chaos, right? That starts to accrue as soon as you have 2 humans. As soon as there's a communication loop that has to happen outside of somebody's brain, right? That's so there's benefit and value there. We tend to focus on companies, from 10 to 250 employees in size, just because at that point, it's, a combination of scale and maturity and financial wherewithal, right? To be able to bring a implementer on board. And then 250 as an upper target for size, because fundamentally we're talking about change management. And change management is hard in any organization, but the inertia that exists in a 500, 800 person company is pretty considerable. And you would really have to have a huge amount of dedication and exert a lot of influence to roll out and get the EOS tools and practices kind of adopted thoroughly in that large of an organization. Not saying that it can't be done. Also, there are a tremendous number of businesses that are well above that threshold. They just didn't start there.
Oh, do you have any favorite stories of the type of transformation that your clients have seen as they've, going from, like, maybe they didn't have a clear vision and then maybe results that they get at some point? Any, like, anecdotes that come to mind?
The clarity around the vision and around the purpose, cause, or passion that fuels or drives the business, right? Like, why do we exist? Why do all of us bother to get out of bed every day and do this work? Daniel Pink in his book Drive, he talks about the things that like motivate, and one of them is being able to work with purpose, right? And so clarifying for everybody in the business, like what particular, like why are we doing this, is super valuable. Sometimes companies come in and they just know. I mean, it's really obvious, but for other companies, I work with one service-based business, kind of in the automotive sector. And like to some employees starting out the journey, I think it was just a job, right? But through the process of working together, and it took a couple passes, right? This is an iterative process, but eventually we landed in a place where the whole leadership team had an aha that was like, oh, we're not just providing this kind of service, like we are serving the people who serve our community. And like it just everybody had this light bulb moment, right? And all of a sudden it created a lot more meaning for the work that they were doing. And when that is palpable, when that's felt at the leadership team level, that ripples, what we see we always say frequently, like what as goes the leadership team, so goes the rest of the company. And bringing that new perspective, has helped align the business and motivate individuals. They had issues with, these are common issues, but uh, follow through and accountability and stuff like that. But when people feel like there's a deeper reason, for the work that they're doing, that ends up being less so. Yeah. I mean, other just more practical sort of anecdotes is just with the greater role clarity that, people arrive at through the process, it just reduces stress levels, right? There's so much less uncertainty and unclarity, which is stressful. Like your brain has to like buffer constantly thinking about like, oh, what am I missing and whatever. But when you just know with certainty, like what are the things I have to focus on? What are the processes? How does it move from point A to point B? Like it just life gets a lot easier. For some of the entrepreneurs, business owners that I work with, like just their lives get so much better, right? Because oftentimes they feel like the weight of the whole organization is on their shoulders. One, because like they haven't really structured a true leadership team to distribute the load across, right? And that's one of the big initial benefits that's enjoyed by businesses running on EOS. But the tools and practices help with delegation, right? So these owners that have felt like they need to do everything in the business, including the things that they don't like to do and or are terrible at, all of a sudden everybody is elevating to kind of their unique ability, like the things that they like to do and are good at. And we're making sure that, we're having those right people in the right seats. And there's just a lot of ease that comes with that. I have one owner who has gotten to a place, he's sort of the visionary founder of a marketing agency. And because of this really talented leadership team that he's built, at in the business, he's able to take a sabbatical every summer. And, he wasn't able to get out of day to day before. Couldn't even fathom that that would be possible.
So let's switch gears a little bit. So if we're going down the people category or component, you said,
Oh, man. Yeah.
because that's where we overlap a little bit. So as you know, I like to work with people on their deeper unconscious patterns that often show
Mhm.
up in teams. And one of my favorite tools to do that is the Enneagram, which is a really ancient system. You've got things like StrengthsFinder, Myers-Briggs, DISC, Colby, and all of those are great instruments for different reasons. Why I like to use the Enneagram is because not only it can look at strengths, but it also looks at blind spots. And it is like it's kind of like a map. Like once you see your own type and then you can see like, oh, no wonder I'm in conflict with this other person because we're on the same, line with each other, but we have worked on the Enneagram a little bit and you've gotten to know it over time. I'll let you chime in, but I think you identify as type 3. How does that show up for you? How have you noticed at different points and maybe describe what that's been like for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm still on my own path of integration, right? But my first introduction to the Enneagram was in my marketing agency. We used it as a tool, like a team building tool, and a understand one another even more deeply, and as a unit. And we used it in retrospect. I'm appreciating, especially through the conversations that we've had, like in a much more surface level, sort of way. But it was still super informative, and it helped us appreciate just these fundamental, differences of disposition and whatnot between different members of the team, and it gave us yet another framework to understand, like, people are just different. It's not because, they're bad or wrong or whatever, that they're an asshole, pardon my language, that might need to get bleeped out, but it's just that they bring a different, set of tools and experiences and orientation to things. And I believe really deeply that the more people can understand themselves and the more they can understand one another different, on a team, the better that team's gonna be able to work, right? And so, in EOS, we rely a lot, on Colby, different, but it provides similar insight. I mean, in the sense of just, like, understanding kinda, like, how we are, you know? But when we were using the Enneagram back in my marketing agency, that was where I first came to learn about it and discovered that I was a type 3. And I think a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs are type 3. They tend to be, and you correct me if I
Right.
misspeak, but
We
like,
see it. You see all types. Every type can be a leader,
oh
but
yeah,
yeah,
I mean that's
we
true,
see
but
threes, we see eights, we see
very
10s.
very like sort of achievement driven,
Mm.
sometimes like achievement at the expense of, other things. And that was really eye-opening for me. Was one of the first times, not the first time, but an early instance of me kinda recognizing that some of my drive as an entrepreneur maybe wasn't entirely healthy, right? That it was trying to compensate for some gap or void, or, a feeling of worth that, might not have been completely bestowed, in my upbringing and things like that. That's been my experience, and then just kinda coming back to it in more recent months and focusing on it more from kind of an integration perspective, I can see or appreciate kind of how the Enneagram can be leveraged as part of one's, like, personal and professional sort of growth journey, which
Mhm.
is really exciting to me, and it's something that it's kind of ongoing for me.
Yeah, as a fellow 3, a lot of times, I think 3s often will work and work and work, and they don't understand why they're driving, and that can get you some good things, like, you can get success, you can get bonuses, you can get promotions, you can build a company, you can sell that company. And yet, threes will often hit a health crisis and they'll hit a wall of like, I can't do this anymore. And so that burnout, and when the leader is in burnout, the
Yeah,
rest of the team is likely to operate in burnout.
that makes sense. I definitely can relate to that. Would you agree that it's accurate to say that threes are better at doing than being?
That's part of the path.
Yeah,
Yeah, threes are
that's been my experience.
human doings, and I know, as I was learning about the Enneagram from my mentors and teachers, and they talk about, "Can you just be? Stop the
Yeah,
doing." At first, I was like, "What even is that?" Like,
that's
what
so
does it
brilliant.
mean? And over time, it took practices to first of all, meditation has been hugely helpful to be able to slow down, turn inwards, find that space inside, not have to fill up my calendar all the time. And now I can find great joy in being. And what begins to happen is, threes are in the heart center. We're in the center of the emotional center, two, threes, and fours. Yet so many of us are disconnected from our feelings. We skip over them
Mhm.
and we think we can be task oriented instead of connection oriented. And yet, what I found on my journey is I'm actually super sensitive. And I think I was skipping over those feelings because it was too much. And yet, going back to the being comment, if I can relax my nervous system enough and if I can bring my attention to my heart center and really drop in, it's almost like letting my head take a break. It's like dropping my attention from head into heart and then sitting here. What happens is, and there's all this scientific research these days around heart and brain coherence and what happens when the rhythms of your heart and brain get in these certain brain waves and we are able to access flow states. We're able to access that place
Mm.
where creativity happens. Companies say they want creativity and innovation, and when our nervous systems are in overdrive
Oh, yeah, totally.
all the time, that is not accessible.
Yeah.
So, coming into the heart space, being able to generate heart and brain coherence from within is a practice that then allows being. And then once you can settle in here, and I love like being in nature or walking my dog and just settling in and being, it's like I open up to feeling the universal field of energy, of love, of everything that is unseen but around us. Because I think so many times threes feel like if I'm not doing, the world is gonna collapse. And if I don't keep it going, like so the more we can be, you
Yeah.
also have to trust the universe fundamentally has my back. And that it's not just up to me to get it all done.
Yeah, boy, that strikes so many different chords from my own experience. Like it's been a journey of meditation and spiritual growth and just mindfulness in general, like throughout, every piece of my life. And I am a better leader and coach when I make sure that there's space for that to happen. Weeks when my calendar is back to back to back every day all week long, I'm out of my mind by the end. There's no space for that connection to, well, just connection, right? Connection to myself, connection to the wider world, connection to colleagues and clients and whatever as actual humans.
It's a journey, and I think what happens is the more we can be and the more we're in resonance within ourselves, presence alone can change a room. Like, we can have an agenda, we could say, like, "Here's what we're trying to get out of this meeting," but there's something about a calm, regulated nervous system that if you've got other people that are like, "Ah, what's going on?" That beingness carries weight, it carries resonance, it carries an ability to bring like, stability into the room energetically.
Yep. I totally agree. And I get asked often whether I work with teams like virtually or otherwise. And I can, like my session space on Boardwalk Drive in Ann Arbor has all of the technology to support remote and distributed hybrid teams. But my deepest like passion and priority is to work with teams in the room, right? Because I feel like my job as a facilitator and coach is to be able to bring that, right, what you were just describing, and tap into sort of the energy in the room and use that to inform how I guide the team and how encourage teams to kind of step into the danger a little bit and get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I can't register body language and that sort of essential sort of vibrational thing that happens when humans are in a room together. And so I love that you brought that up because it's really important to me, and I feel like there's a little bit of job security for me in that, that AI is not gonna take that part of my
You
job
take
because
that part away.
yeah,
No.
because I mean, and it's gonna take some really sophisticated technology to be able to do that, you know? So
Let me ask you, threes can seek approval to be safe. And sometimes we don't want to disrupt connection. It's kind of like, oh, I'm going to be thrown out of the tribe if I say something that could upset someone. So I found, like, in terms of the journey of an emotional literacy for a three, first of all, it's like, can I feel the body sensations? Can I label them? Oh, that's sadness, that's anger, that's fear. And then there's a whole nother component. And am I willing to say the thing that I see, even if it's disruptive? I could lose approval. Am I willing to actually say what I see? How have you dealt with that on your journey as a
oh,
facilitator? And
absolutely. I mean, I have to contend with that in different forms and fashions with every team in every session, and part of that is why teams that have an implementer, like a facilitator to help them adopt these tools and this way of operating do so much better, like are more successful in the long run is because they've got somebody standing on the outside of the jar, right? That they're inside and reading that label and reflecting it back to them and calling things out, labeling things when the group might not be able to, or might not be able to step outside of themselves and see the patterns of thought and behavior and emotions and kind of push them, right? Like push them just a little bit. And the reason that it works in this system is that we've created this shared vision and plan for the organization. And the way we are oriented, like what we believe is that like that represents the greater good for the organization. If everybody is bought into that, if we all agree and are on the same page that like the vision and plan that's articulated in that document, which we call the vision traction organizer, the VTO, that's the greater good for the organization. And so that it's often once we have that to hold up, we can point to it and say like it's for the greater good of the organization that we need to step into this discomfort and say the thing that's hard to say. And because it's all like if we all believe that we are shoulder to shoulder in alignment, pointing towards this vision, then we can't let those things hold us back. And so and that's hard. Ugh, it's hard, but having somebody in the room that can call it out and say, "Huh, I feel this. I feel a voice for something like this, or I'm not sure I entirely hear, agreement, or I'm noticing your body language. Like, do you have a different perspective that would be valuable for the team, or and or getting even more like forward, depending on the team, like different teams want or need or benefit from more or less aggressive, sort of facilitation, but it's hugely valuable.
so, one question I always ask all my podcast guests is, what does courageous leadership mean to you?
Boy, I mean, a couple different things. I think for visionary founders of businesses, I feel like it's having the courage to say that big vision or dream out loud, even if other people are going to look at you like you have like a third eye growing out of your forehead or whatever, and to like be okay, like devoting like all of your passion and energy towards this dream. I think some people really hold back and self-censor and all of that. So I think that's part of it. I think more generally applicable, it's just being vulnerable, right? Like being accepting that like living in humility and being present with the fact that none of us are perfect, being able to sort of accept that and give voice to that and open yourself up to feedback or just kind of a more vulnerable level of sharing and connection than is common in a lot of workplaces because it's scary. Like, it's like being in a room face to face with another human who's, like, in the social construct, like maybe your employee. There's, like, a lotta weird emotional stuff that's happening in both of those humans, and a lotta times that goes completely ignored or unacknowledged, and I think if you can be more present with that and accept that and be more vulnerable, like, it's just more satisfying. It's gonna feel more safe for people. It's gonna yeah, and people are gonna actually feel bought in, committed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it strikes me that the entrepreneurial path fundamentally takes courage because there's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of like, is this going to work? I've got this idea. How do we make it happen? Especially founders who then, build the company around the founder, they have to deal with their stuff because when you're the poster child for your own brand, for the company, for it fundamentally requires taking on our own insecurities, our own knowing how we when we show up, are we like is our shadow that hasn't been
Mm.
processed coming into the room if we
Yeah.
haven't dealt with it?
Yeah, and it matters so deeply because now it's not just you, it's like the livelihoods of however many employees that you have that hinge on you being, having a steady hand on the tiller, yeah, you gotta deal with your stuff. Everybody should have a coach and a therapist, especially if you're a leader or an entrepreneur, like, you gotta have I would say a coach, a therapist, and a system to run your business on.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times people don't understand what coaching is, and a lot of it's really designed in the moment to help you be the best version of yourself. And sometimes you need to touch back into those things that have happened in the past where a therapist can certainly help. And yet, I've had many, many coaches and therapists along the way to help me. I view it as just part of this human journey. And the more aware I am of my own, it's almost like a hook. I notice like if I get hooked by something, if something's happening out here, somebody's doing something, and it's causing irritation over here, there's a hook in me. Like, they're doing their thing, but it's not them causing it. Like, and
Yeah.
so the more that we can see our own triggers, our own things that's like, why is that driving me crazy? Because some things just pass right through us. If we process something, it's like, oh, somebody can do something and it's not going to set me off my rocker.
Right?
Let me ask you this. If people want to start working with you, like how does that process start? Like where can they find you?
Right. Classic symptoms are, business owners that feel like they're carrying the weight of the whole company on their shoulders, or leaders that are just constantly running from fire to fire, and organizational chaos kind of rules the day and all that. So for folks who feel that, they feel like they're stuck, they have a place they want to get to with their business and they just keep trying and they're just not getting any closer, reach out. You could start by reading Traction. For, those who are serious and want to get there quicker, reach out and I can give you the 90-minute Cliff Notes version. But yeah, so our process starts with getting the leadership team in a room with me and just kind of having this really significant kind of two-way exchange of information about EOS, about the business, about how the tools can be brought to bear to like help the organization get everything it wants and out of the business, and what the process looks like. And that's free. It's completely complimentary. And they can reach out, just go to jeremylopatin.com. That'll take you to my site and go directly to booking a 90-minute meeting, me, with your leadership team, or just, ask a question to start, figuring out if it's the right fit. It's totally free and there's no commitment, you know. What we talk about resonates and feels like it's the right thing, then we schedule our first full day of work together.
Again, sometimes I'll still get I'm not doing as much strategic planning these days. If I get an inquiry, there's a couple things that I'll do, but most I'm just gonna be like, just go to Jeremy. He's got the system. Like he can take me from vision to execution because honestly, I just really it clicked when you described how EOS runs and all the pieces of it and the way that it goes from the biggest vision, 10-year vision, down to these, weekly and daily cadences that really help people operationalize that vision. I've just been really impressed by the system and how elegant and efficient and just it's a really coolly designed system.
From the day that I discovered it, it was like 2011. I could never see or think about an organization the same way. Like, it totally changed how I thought about how a business or organization could run, and it really opened my eyes to just everything that's possible. And I'm so grateful that willing to, like, learn more about it and have that light bulb go off too and talk about it and have me on this podcast, and
I just appreciate the work that you do with teams and the ripple effect. And so thank you so much for your time today. This has been a great conversation. And thanks so much to all of our listeners. If today was a great conversation for you, please like and subscribe to help other people find this content as well. And until next time, stay courageous, stay connected.